It was truly said that when William Gilbert Grace began to play, cricket was largely a country pastime. When he finally retired, it had become a national institution. Well, he strode confidently on the cricket world as a strong lad of 17, the third of 4 sons of a Gloucestershire doctor, in 1865, and he played the last of his 151 innings for the Gentlemen against the Players at the Oval on his 58th birthday in 1906, a good many years before broadcasting was thought of. Luckily, though, we are not entirely lacking in the spoken word regarding W.G. and his times. We can even begin with the description of a famous finish at Lord's in 1870, the year of the Franco-Prussian War, when W.G. and his brothers were only beginning to bring Gloucestershire to the fore among the counties, and before there were such things as test matches. The occasion was the university match, and the narrator, remembering it all many years later, was F.A. Mackinnon of Cambridge. The situation was that when the time came for stumps to be drawn, the game was so nearly over that it was decided to finish it.
The game had gone very evenly up to the end of the second day, when the captains agreed the match should be concluded in order to enable Oxford to win. At that period, the game stood like this: Oxford having 3 wickets in hand, 4 runs to get, and the last over of the day of 4 balls was to be bowled. The spectators began to leave the field. It was, to their minds, a foregone conclusion. At that critical moment, Money, our captain, a lob bowler, put on our fast bowler, Cobden. By the by, why aren't there lob bowlers nowadays? A little bird has whispered to me that neither Bradman nor Hammond know how to play them. Was not the varsity match of 1875 won by a lob bowler? When Cambridge, towards the end of that match, wanted but 6 runs to win and had 2 wickets to fall, Janny Ridley, captain of the Oxford 11, and a lob bowler, put himself on and bowled the 2 wickets without a run, and so won the match for Oxford by 6 runs, the pluckiest thing ever done in cricket to my mind. Now to revert to the 1870 match. Cobden bowled his first ball to Hill, who was well in, and who scored 1 run from it, thus getting to the bowler's end. That left 3 wickets, 3 balls, 3 runs. Cobden then delivered his second ball, and Butler was caught by Bourne at mid-on. With his third ball, he bowled Belcher middle stump. That left the same 3 runs, 1 ball, and 1 wicket to fall. The last man, Stewart, the wicket-keeper, then walked to the wicket. He passed close to me in the field and was as white as a ghost. His captain, Portsford, had given him a little brandy and told him on no account to lift his bat from the block hole, an injunction rather difficult to follow, you will all admit. He did lift his bat, and the match was over. Bowled middle stump.
What a gem. An object lesson, you may be thinking, in clarity and objective reporting. Perhaps I may bring in here a personal reminiscence which has a special place in my memory, because it is for me a link with the very beginnings of Test cricket. He took part, in fact, in the 3rd Test ever played. During the Canterbury week of 1946, old Mackinnon, he was the 35th chief of the Mackinnon clan, said to me, "I hear you're going to Australia, young man." Yes, sir, I said, with the MCC team. Oh, I could tell you about Australia. I played out there, you know. And so he had, with Lord Harris's team in 1878. Now here he was, much the oldest Test cricketer still living, aged 98, straight of limb and keen of mind. The following winter, the editor of Wisden, Hubert Preston, rang him up at his home in Morrisha to see how he was. "I'm fine," he said. "I'm just going to the hospital, but only to chair the annual meeting." Brave words, but sad to say, at the end of that freezing winter, he died 40 days short of his 99th birthday. Back now to W.G., and to the reminiscences of a Gloucestershire man giving an idea of his appearance and style at the wicket, and describing, in rich West Country tones, the scene when W.G. reached his 100th hundred.
I should say a model batsman, not a fluent batsman by any means, not a Wally Hammond, but a sound, solid batsman who had learnt the technique of cricket from a boyhood. But when he got his 100 hundreds, a flunky came out in what we should now call evening dress, with a tray and glasses and a bottle of champagne. And the players gathered round, the Somerset players gathered round, and they drank his health in champagne.
W.G. reached this historic milestone on the 16th of May, 1895. He went on to make 288, and by the end of that month of May, he had reached his 1,000 runs, a feat never accomplished, or indeed ever approached, before. 2 months later, he was celebrating his 47th birthday. He made 900s in what for him was a golden summer. Although he went on playing for many years, this season of 1895 was the crowning point in the career of, it was said, the best-known man in England, a distinction some thought that perhaps he shared with Mr. Gladstone, or possibly the Prince of Wales. Here is an impression of W.G. from a famous figure in the game, indeed one of the greatest of all-round sportsmen, for he played for England at association football as well as cricket, and was a world champion at the long jump, by name Charles Burgess Fry.
He stood his full height, and he was a long way over 6 feet. He played every stroke with a real swing of the arms. That was the reason why he got the reputation of being able to block shooters to the boundary. The simple fact was he came down extremely quickly from a great height, and he very rarely missed the ball, and when he came down, the ball had to go, and it went. He made bowling look very small when he was on the job. And I'll tell you another thing. When he was in, he made everybody else on the field look like a boy.
Blocking shooters to the boundary. I was lucky enough to write cricket in the mid-1930s in company with Charles Fry. We were both employed by the Evening Standard. I to do the straight reporting, he to contribute a pithy, staccato, sometimes amusing column, which was very popular, called C.B. Fry Says. It was written very much as he talked. The compositors are said to have jibbed only at printing quotations in Greek. He was great company and very kind to me. Here's another first-hand impression of W.G., spoken as it were from the pavilion by a member of MCC who obviously knew the game, a young man about town called Sir Charles Tennyson. He was a descendant of the poet and cousin of the famous England captain of later years, Lionel Lord Tennyson. The match he is describing was the great game of the season in the 19th century, and for many years afterwards, when there were no visitors of test match status, that between gentlemen and players at Lord's, the pick of the amateurs and the pick of the professionals. This one, in 1898, was called the Jubilee match because it was played on W.G.'s 50th birthday.
When about 5 weeks were down, it was perfectly clear that And so he went in with his bad hand, and he again stayed in, this time for 2 or 3 hours. At 5:30, 9 wickets were down, and C.J. Courtwright, the fast bowler, came in. And at 3 minutes to 7, C.J. Courtwright was still in, having made 47. And the old man had made, I think, 36. He hadn't attempted to score because his hand was too bad. But again, he'd put everybody exactly where he meant to. And at 3 minutes to 7, the bowler very insidiously bowled Courtwright a rather slightly short half volley, rather wide of the off, and he was caught extra cover, which is rather a disaster. As a matter of fact, I met Courtwright some years afterwards, and I reminded him of this and accused him of having succumbed to the ambition of making 50 in the gentleman players, which he repudiated indignantly.
Did he?
Such a thing had never crossed his mind.
But Courtwright, interviewed here, denies he was trying to get his 50. Charles Courtwright was educated at Tunbridge School, and he played for Essex, and was reckoned to be the fastest bowler of his day, and one of the fastest ever. Though he went in last on this occasion, he had a first-class 100 to his credit. So, as a matter of fact, had every man in the side.
Well, that was at 20 minutes to 6. As I passed him going up the nursery end, an old man who'd gone in late because he was lame. He got a bruised heel, and he went in about number 7 or 8. He says, "Forty," he says, "don't be nervous. Hey, your usual game." I said, "All right, Doc, I'll do my best." So, well, we managed to jog along till 6:30, when, having stuck it out that length, I gave a sigh of relief, thinking it was all over. Then, to my, chagrin, that's a good word, isn't it? I found we had to go on till 7. Well, we managed to stick it out until 5 minutes to 7, when Arthur Shrewsbury put on Bill Lockwood, a deadly bowler, with that nasty slow ball which I never knew how to treat. And I knew it had got to come. And first 2 balls, I stopped. Old man says, "Well played, well played." And then number 3 came that horrible slow thing, which he bowled so awfully well. And I suppose I had a bit of, what should I say, inferiority complex, and gave a half-hearted flick at it, and it went out somewhere out in the Cover Point district where Scopey Haig was fielding, and he made a running catch of it, and that was that. All over. And I'd failed by 3 minutes or 3 balls to save the old man's Jubilee match.
Notice, "All right, Doc." W.G. was called by a variety of names, but not as a rule Doc. Needless to say, he was a qualified doctor, and despite a lot of jokes about his medical skill, or rather lack of it, originating, I suppose, because he was so often playing cricket, I prefer to believe the famous Bernard Darwin, who wrote a charming short biography of him, and told of his care for the poor of his Bristol parish. There was the time when he had promised to see a woman through her confinement, and W.G. was batting when her labour started. He stayed with her all night until the baby was delivered, and next day he took his score to 221 not out, having batted right through the innings. That was at Clifton in 1885. He generally got a big score near his home patch at Clifton. Notice how Courtwright said he was lame, while Tennyson said he was handicapped by a bad hand. Who was right? The answer is both. Plum Warner, the historian of Jensen players, wrote that in spite of lameness and a bad hand, he batted splendidly. Now, this revealing little picture shows W.G.'s consideration for a young cricketer playing in his first big match. The occasion was a historic one, in that it was the very first appearance in England of the first West Indians ever to come over here. They played London County, the club that W.G. founded and played for at the Crystal Palace. The speaker is James or Jimmy Gilman.
When I got there, there was, I think it was 6 test players and 4 or 5 very experienced ones, and I felt absolutely the odd man out. I was feeling frightened out of my life. The old man went out to toss. He came back. He looked at me sitting in the corner all alone. He said, "What's the matter, Jimmy? Are you frightened?" And I said, "I'm terrified, sir." He said, "Well, I've won the toss. Get your pads on. I'm taking you in with me." And that was a sample of the way he assessed anybody's temperament. I should have been a complete jelly if I'd been waiting there till the middle of the innings when everybody else had been making runs.
Well, that is the voice of an old man, and I've heard Jimmy Gilman reminisce in the committee room at Hove, it seems only the day before yesterday. In fact, he died at 97, only a year younger than the Mackinnon, in 1976, and he held court down there at Hove almost to the end of his life. One generally has to allow a good deal for fading memories, but Jimmy's facts are 100% correct. W.G. and he opened the match together and put on 136 for the first wicket, 71 to the old man, 63 to the 21-year-old, and there were 5 test cricketers in the side. W.G. could also be a disciplinarian. He was a stickler, all right, and this was a lesson this same young man, Jimmy Gilman, obviously never forgot.
Well, there was one case when I arrived late on the field. I was only 2 minutes late. London County were playing Cambridge. But he was having a net, and he saw me sneaking in to the ground. And when he came out, he said, "How dare you? What have you been up to?" And I said, "I've been to my tailor." And that, of course, finished him off. He said, "You go in last." So old Bill Murdoch, as usual, smoothing things over, said, "If Jimmy goes in last, I'm going in number 10, which duly happened, and he and I put on a devil of a lot of runs for the last wicket and got me a trial for Cambridge in the next match.
Again, the facts are right. Gilman and Billy Murdoch put on 121 for the last wicket in 70 minutes. Murdoch was a great crony of W.G.'s, an Australian who came over 5 times with Australian teams before settling in England and playing first for Sussex and then with London County. Gilman again.
One evening we came back from a cricket match, and in those days we either had to have a hansom cab or what was known as a growler, a 4-wheeler, and they took a 4-wheeler. We arrived at Jimmy's restaurant in town, and both the old men got up at the same time, and the combined weight was just about 40 stone, and that was too much for the floor of the cab, and they went through, wallop, into the road. And a little crowd of us following in the next cab, we just laughed our heads off, but we didn't let him hear it, and we had to pull them both out.
A comical scene. Notice we didn't let him hear it. They all loved him, but it didn't do to take liberties. Now we have a version of a very well-known cricket story, which may excite the historically minded, though there can never be agreement about the facts. It's to do with the ball that went through W.G.'s beard.
Jones, the Australian fast bowler, supposed to have bowled a ball bumper through his beard. Well, the actual story is it wasn't a bumper at all. It was a full pitch straight at him, which he just put his head back slightly, and it went under his chin, and as there was a beard on it, it went through the beard. He said, "Steady, Jonah," and Jonah said, "Sorry, doctor, she slipped." And that's the exact what really happened. I was there.
Well now, the 2 best-known versions of this famous incident are as follows. Lord Harris said it happened in the Lord's Test of 1896. Sir Stanley Jackson said that W.G. was playing for Lord Sheffield's 11 in the first match of that 1896 tour on a bumpy wicket, and Jones's first ball, after brushing the beard, went over the wicket-keeper's head to the sight screen. Gilman didn't say he was playing, you will have noticed, only that he saw it and that it was what is now called a beamer, a fast full pitch. New balls are slippery, and no doubt she slipped, whether a full pitch or not. What is not in question is that Jones's bowling action was highly suspect as a throw. "What are you at, Jonah?" called W.G. in that strangely squeaky voice. "Sorry, Doctor, she slipped." What a pity, by the way, that there is no recording of W.G. speaking. Jones was a raw, humorous South Australian, and perhaps I've got just a moment to tell a story illustrating the sort of chap he was. He met the then Prince of Wales, afterwards Edward VII, who asked him if he had attended St. Peter's College, Adelaide. "Yes," said Jonah, "I take the dust cart there regularly." Now a story about yet another Australian, the great bowler Spofforth, whom they called the Demon. Many thought the finest bowler ever. Like Billy Murdoch, he settled in England, and he played for the famous Hampstead Cricket Club, just a mile or two up the road from Lord's. The narrator is the old patriarch and historian of Hampstead, F.R.D. Monroe, who played with Spoff and who was still amusing us with his stories when I played a bit for Hampstead just after the war. The last war, by the way.
Spofforth didn't like having catches missed off him, and one match, soon after I joined, I was skippering the side, and Spofforth was the bowler. He was rather unfortunate that day because the slips missed one or two catches, and he became very despondent. And as we were walking into lunch, I went up to him and said, "Cheer up, Spoff. I expect in Australia, even your wonderful Australians miss catches off you sometimes." And he said, "No, never. I coached them." And I said, "Oh, did you? You tell me. What did you do?" "I'll bite." "Well," he said, "in the part of Australia that I come from, we've got hedgerows. And on a Sunday, I used to take out a packet of stones in my pocket, and I walked on one side of the hedges, and they walked on the other. I threw the stones into the hedges, and they caught the sparrows as they came out."
A tall story? Well, take it or leave it. Charles Fry's career overlapped W.G.'s, and in this typical Fry piece, not overburdened with modesty, we learn that he owed quite a lot to him.
When I was about 15 and a half, I got into my school 11 at Repton. They were very good. They had a very fine player captain called L.C.H. Pallaret, a very good cricket indeed. And I made runs in house matches as an under-16er, and I was pushed into the first 11. And I always made runs of sorts. And then when I went up to Oxford, Pallaret was captain of the game, and I got straight into the Oxford 11, you see. In fact, I made 100 in the freshmen's match. And they all said I was a very bad bat, but the bother was I made runs. And I was a bowler, a fast bowler. And I made runs in the varsity match, you know, and I was asked to play for the gentlemen at Lord's as a fast bowler first. But I thought I was a bat. And everyone says I didn't become a bat until I met Ranji, but I made a lot of runs before I met him. Fact was, old W.G. asked me to go and play for his London county team against the Australians, and I made just 90-something, I think. That was 99. And W.G. was captain of England, and he wouldn't have me left out. I think it was because he wanted to go in first with me with the certainty that he wouldn't be run out because he was getting on for 50 then.
In fact, Fry got 81, and the team was called South of England. We've reached now the turn of the century, and with it the advent of the man who is generally rated the greatest bowler ever. His name was Sidney Francis Barnes, a Staffordshire man by birth who had qualified for Lancashire by playing for Burnley in the league. The match he refers to was Lancashire's last of the season. It was the only one Barnes played in, and R.G. McLaren, the captain, picked him just on the strength of his performance. He took 6 for 70.
After the match, Lancashire versus Leicester, I heard a whisper that if I showed signs of getting my agreement with Burnley cancelled, McLaren would ask me to go to Australia with his team. At the time, I thought that they were pulling my leg. But sure enough, McLaren came at the end of the game and asked me if I could get my agreement cancelled with Burnley. So I told him that I didn't know. I'd just signed 3 years engagement with Burnley. But when I got back, I'd approach the committee and see what could be done. Evidently, this was enough for McLaren, because next day I received a wire from him asking me if I'd join his Australian team. This wire I kept in the pocket for a couple of days, ignoring it or forgetting it, until on the Saturday afternoon we were playing a league match, and I showed this wire to the captain of Burnley and asked him, I said, "What do you think of this, Joe?" "Well," he said, "have you replied to this?" I said, "No. Perhaps I don't want to go." Well, knowing quite well that I'd gone just for bare expenses. Well, he said, "Get off the field and send a wire accepting it." So nothing would do, but I had to go off the field and send a wire away, accepting McLaren's terms. In the second test match at Melbourne, I did even better than I did at Sydney. Blythe and myself went through the Australians' first innings. I took 6 wickets and Blythe took 4. But things like that wouldn't happen nowadays, because the captains won't put a spin bowler on to start with. They want shot bowlers. In their second innings, I bowled 66 overs with 10 minutes rest at the end of 45 overs and took 7 wickets for about 120.
This new voice from Nottinghamshire belonged to John Gunn, elder brother of George, whom we shall be hearing later on. As usual, the figures are completely accurate.
The first time I saw Barnes was in 1901 tour with McLaren's team. Barnes did wonderfully well in the first 2 tests. He had a marvellous length and spin and took a lot of wickets. In the match at Adelaide, he broke down and had to be carried off the field. McLaren came to me and said, "Well, Barnes is jiggered. You'll have to go on bowling, Jack." I did, and took 5 wickets for 76 runs.
Playing against McLaren's side on that same tour was E.F. Waddy, who later took holy orders and played for Warwickshire. The match was at Newcastle, New South Wales, and G.L. Jessup, as well as Barnes, made a deep impression on him.
That was in a country match when he first came out of McLaren's 11. I remember that match well because we were all anxious to see Gilbert Jessup. He came in, the first ball he hit for 6. And the other thing that I remember particularly about that match is when I was batting to Barnes. He bowled me a ball that I'd never seen the like of since, and never wished to. It was at his top pace. It seemed to me to have pitched on the leg stump, and it missed the off stump. I turned round to the wicket-keeper with a look of amazement. "That's all right," he said. "That's the one that bowls the best of them. You needn't worry." And Barnes, when he was out there, bowled that ball pretty often.
And now it's time to say goodbye to WG and to bring this era to an end.
I remember during the beginning of the 1914 war, I was stationed at Grove Park, close to where he lived, and he sent me an invitation, and I went over there, and he got a large basket full of apples from his orchard. It was just the right season then, and he filled this basket right up and told me to take it back to the troops. That's the last time I ever saw the old man. He died the year after, in October.
A nice story from his friend Jimmy Gilman about a very human person.